Thanks everyone for joining us for the Chamber of Commerce's Business Growth Series. It's sponsored by Cowen Insurance Group. I'm Christina Hilgartner and I manage our small business sales team here at Cowen, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you to our Cyber Secured webinar. It's on protecting your business from the inevitable. So cybersecurity has gained a lot of importance with the onset of the pandemic and resulting growth of our remote workforce, and many small and mid-sized businesses fail to consider cybersecurity as a strategy when they're assessing their risks. But the threat of cyber attacks and the risk to the business is one that definitely you can't afford to ignore. The consequences can be devastating. So joining us to share their cyber risk expertise today, we have Shelley Ma and Katie Pollock from Coalition. So I'll just give you a little bit of background on them. So Shelley Ma possesses quite a bit of expertise in the cyber investigations area. She's been doing this since 2014. She's analyzed, responded to, and investigated over 700 cybersecurity cases and has received numerous recognitions for her work. And she's highly sought after, great at public speaking and cyber-related topics. Katie recently joined Coalition at the beginning of 2021, and she works closely with her broker partners and policyholders as they work to solve cyber risks. And she believes that insurance is just one part of the cyber risk management strategy. She's always eager to share any insights for better managing and mitigating of the risk that she possesses. Cowen's also proud to partner with the Chamber of Commerce. We're doing a contest right now where employees can get preferred pricing for their home and auto insurance needs. It's running until December 31st. So you can be entered to win up to $5,000 in cash when you request a quote for your home, auto, or business insurance. So the link I will drop in the chat. It's visit win10k.cowengroup.ca to enter. So I'll drop that link in the chat and I encourage all of you to check that out. So I'll pass it on to Katie and Shelley when they're ready.
Good morning, everyone. We do have a lot of exciting material to get through today. I just wanted to welcome you to the Cowen and Coalition webinar. So today we're going to be talking about cyber awareness, the biggest cyber threats organizations face today. In this webinar, you'll learn about the most common cyber attacks, how criminals are executing cybercrime, and how being mindful of what your cyber footprint looks like will really assist you in effectively growing your business. It's just one less thing you'll have to worry about. So I'm Katie Pollock. I'm in business development at Coalition, which is a leading cyber insurance provider. We're now top 10 on the globe, and we're actually the largest insurtech on the globe now. And with me, I'll be joined by my colleague, Ms. Shelley Ma, who is our incident response lead at Coalition in Canada. So Shelley's handled hundreds of cyber claims over the course of her career, beginning in 2016. So we're both really excited to tackle such a great topic today. I'll let Shelley introduce herself in a minute, but one of my main things that I want you to take away from today is that protecting your intangible assets is just as important as protecting your tangible assets, such as your property. So the nature of cyber risk is pervasive. It's profound. It happens so frequently. It's estimated that, unfortunately, this year alone, cyber risk will contribute to $6 trillion of economic loss throughout the world. And we certainly don't want any of that occurring in your organization. And as a cyber insurance provider, we want to actually help you with that. So $6 trillion, which leads me into the first poll question, if you will, Caitlin. So if this year it's contributing to $6 trillion, what do you think it will contribute to by 2025? I feel like this is an easier question here. So get your answers in here while you can. So yeah, obviously you guys are right there. It's by 2025, it's estimated that it will be contributing to about $10.5 trillion of economic loss around the world, which is crazy, right? So again, we want to do everything we can to help you with that as a cyber insurance provider. I'm going to turn it over to Shelly now. She can introduce herself and she'll let you know what her key takeaways are for today.
Good morning, everyone. It's such a pleasure to speak with this group today. And as Katie kindly mentioned, my name is Shelly Ma. I'm based in Toronto. I'm an incident response lead with Coalition Incident Response, and I work very closely with the claims team handling incidents and claims for our policyholders. What I'm hoping for you to take away from this presentation today are knowledge on the common trends that we're seeing in our landscape today, what the most imminent threats look like from not only the perspective of cost and risk, but also from the standpoint of severity and impact to business operations and reputational harm. So I'll do a fair deep dive into the number one threat today, which of course is ransomware, share with you some war stories from the claim side and highlight the agnostic nature of threat actors when they're seeking their targets. We'll also dispel some myths and finally provide some defense mechanisms that are super easy to implement by your IT team that goes a long way in improving your cyber risk and exposure. Katie, do you want to maybe run through the agenda?
Katie, you are on mute. Do you mind unmuting yourself?
Sorry, apologies. Just a quick note on Zoom before we kick off. You should see two buttons at the bottom of your screen. There's a Q&A button and also a chat button. So feel free to ask us any questions throughout, and we'll actually save some dedicated time at the end for Q&A. Next slide. So just a bit about the agenda today. So first, my wonderful colleague Shelly will talk about some of the challenges that led us to where we are today. And then she'll go over some of the common claims trends that we're seeing in the industry. After that, she'll discuss the threat landscape, showing us how these criminals think and behave, which will definitely be an interesting part of the presentation for you today. And then after that, I'll quickly discuss how a cyber insurance policy would respond in the case of a cyber claim. Shelly will discuss the top security recommendations that you should be implementing in your organization. And then I'll quickly finish it off by discussing Coalition's approach and how we're different than any other cyber insurance carrier in the marketplace. So I'm actually going to pass it back over to Shelly so she can take it from here.
All right. Okay, so trying to imagine what life would be like without technology is practically impossible at this point. We are so dependent on technology that it's become an integral part of our lives, and especially our working lives. As useful as technological advancements have become, modern workforces practically depend on them, sometimes entirely for business operations. And there aren't many businesses today that can actually operate without the internet. And of course, the pandemic hasn't made things easier. The pandemic has escalated our dependency to this whole new level. We're now working from home, where everything is connected to everything: laptops, smart TVs, Siri, Alexa, iPhones. And as for our sensitive data, it's likely not going to be sitting in a filing cabinet or a secure safe. Rather, it's probably sitting somewhere in the cloud or on a server that remote employees need access to. So this whole new era of this digitized work environment has essentially left a lot of unaddressed exposures and vulnerabilities in untested technologies. And that's ultimately the bottom line. And while workforces are becoming technologically enabled, they are not necessarily protecting their remote access capabilities with that same rigor. Efficiency over security is often the mentality. It sort of makes sense, but cyber criminals are very mindful of this and are exploiting this oversight. This chart that you see here shows the percentage of insurance applicants where we identified an insecure remote access on their network. And as you can see, from 2020 to 2021, there's been this significant increase of these vulnerabilities. And again, this is unsurprising, as many organizations were forced to transition to remote work very quickly in 2020. The rush to get up and running during the pandemic caused many organizations to overlook security risks. Many companies fail to recognize that what makes it easier for their employees to access accounts and sensitive information also makes it easier for hackers to target and access that same information. So criminals seize the opportunity, increasing the sophistication of their operations and evolving their tactics with so much precision, which I will expand upon in coming slides. But before I do so, let's throw up a poll, the second poll question here. So what is Coalition's average ransom demand? If you had to take a guess, folks, which one would it be? Interesting results. So it looks like most folks did get it on point. Let's take a look at the outcome. There's a lot of organizations are getting hit with cyber attacks these days. That's not going to be surprising. There's actually been a 57% increase in the number of claims targeting small to medium-sized businesses. $1.2 million is actually the average ransom demand by threat actors against our policyholders this year. $160,000 is the average loss that we're seeing for our policyholders when they experience a security incident or a breach. Cyber events can be disastrous for all companies, regardless of size. So I would say this is a pretty serious problem. Okay, so now that we know what we know and having that high level insight into the severity of our claims, let's tighten our focus and take a look at the actual claims themselves, i.e. what kind of attacks are organizations being hit with. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, so the three most common types of claims that we are seeing at Coalition, and it is reflective of the landscape at large, are ransomware, funds transfer frauds, and business email compromises. Their combined total actually make up 87% of all of our claims. And I'll spend the next few slides diving into each of them a little bit more. But before I do that, I'd like to address a topic that comes up a lot, and that is how do attackers get into the environment? What is the root cause of the compromise, and what are the vectors of intrusion? By and large, what's been consistently the most widely leveraged modality of exploit is phishing. Phishing is when an attacker sends a fraudulent message designed to trick a person into revealing sensitive information to the attacker or allowing the attacker to deploy malware on the victim's infrastructure. We have a saying in our industry that the weakest link in the chain is what's sitting behind the keyboard. And unfortunately, there is a lot of truth in that. End users are by far the easiest to exploit and are also the wealthiest repositories of useful information and account credentials. The biggest differentiation between 2020 and 2021 is the attackers moving away from exploiting external remote services and more towards public-facing applications. And this makes a lot of sense because in 2020, in response to the pandemic, companies opened up remote access to accommodate that remote workforce. Then the world caught up to the risk that this posed and adapted to better security by locking down remote services. And subsequently, in response to that, attackers adapted and got more creative in seeking out the next low-hanging fruit. But still, almost half of cyber incidents are results of phishing scams. I think we have another poll question here, so if we want to throw that up. Okay, so according to Coalition's 2021 claims report, what is not one of the main contributors to cyber breaches? And that's phishing, remote access, brute force attacks, or something else. Okay, let's take a look. Brute force attacks. Very accurate, yes. So good job. And so diving into a little bit more on each of these types of attacks, most notably, what phishing emails predominantly lead to are business email compromises. The most common form of phishing looks like this, if I have to paint a picture. Attacker masks themselves as a vendor, a business partner, or some type of third-party entity, and then sends an email to an employee within the organization with a link to a fake DocuSign page or something similar, maybe a malicious invoice attachment. When the employee accesses the link, they get directed to a fake sign-in page for Microsoft 365. They then enter their actual account credentials, which get harvested by the attacker. Once the attacker has access to the account, they can do all sorts of damage from within the walls of the corporate environment, such as redirecting paychecks, redirecting invoices, or stealing confidential information. That's a very typical scenario. What's interesting is that those companies that have or use Microsoft Office 365 are 6 times more likely to have experienced a business email compromise than any other service. As to why that is, mostly it's because when an entity starts with a Microsoft product, they essentially start with 0 security measures. It's then up to the user of the product to build on that security. So it's not that Microsoft is inherently unsafe. It is just that there are so many ways to fine-tune this product, and many don't have the proper security measures in place. Also, Microsoft 365 is hugely popular with over 200 million users compared to G Suite, which has roughly 6 million users. So because of its popularity, attackers spend a lot of time and energy cultivating attack methodologies to specifically target Microsoft 365. Most business email compromises lead to what's called a funds transfer fraud, or an FTF. And this is the ultimate goal of the attacker, right? It's to get a payout. Funds transfer frauds are among the easiest ways to monetize cybercrime. Unlike ransomware, which requires a lot more sophistication, a lot more integration with various attack techniques and specialized malware, funds transfer frauds is most often perpetrated through phishing and social engineering. And some of our funds transfer fraud incidents don't involve a security failure at all. Criminals will send a spoofed email, doctored invoices, and even make phone calls that appear to be legitimate entities to convince a victim to wire funds. And FTF cases have increased 28% over the last year. But even though we see more FTF cases, if we are able to catch it early enough, we may be able to recover the funds. In the cases where coalitions claims and incident response teams have managed to do a clawback, we've been able to recover 95% of stolen funds in 2021. Funds transfer fraud losses can be very significant, but you can recover losses in many cases if you move extremely quickly. And we do this with banking relationships, structures within coalition, and working with law enforcement. Our biggest clawback to date was actually a Canadian policyholder who inadvertently transferred $5 million to an attacker thinking that they were their vendor. Luckily, they did catch it early. So through a lot of very quick response efforts, we were able to claw back the entirety of the funds. While social engineering and funds transfer losses are still very much present, ransomware is really what reshaped the industry. There are multiple avenues associated with a ransomware loss, a ransomware claim, of which the ransom payment is just one small component. Other avenues include business interruption, recovery and forensics costs, notification costs, and legal fees. And I'm pretty sure that at this stage of the game, ransomware doesn't need too much of an introduction. As a summary, though, there are 3 characteristics that make something ransomware. Ransomware is a type of malware that is designed to encrypt digital files or disks, making them inaccessible to the user. The encryption of the ransomware is reversible, typically by way of contacting the attacker and actually paying a ransom, acquiring the decryption tool. The goal of the ransomware actor is to render the entirety of a network, or at least a significant portion of that network, inoperable so that it can greatly disrupt business operations. And the reason it's so widespread among cyber criminals is because ransomware offers that immediate monetization of the cybercrime, of the cyber event, which is very attractive. So we've prepared a very quick demo of a simplified ransomware infection event. In this case, the user accidentally downloaded a malicious email attachment that has an embedded ransomware executable. They then inadvertently click on it. And there you go, right away, you will be able to see that all of the files are getting encrypted. An obvious sign is that the files or end with an appended like gibberish string. The wallpaper in this case is altered to reflect that an event has taken place, and then a ransom note gets dropped. This is this is a very generic example of a ransom note, and this is the unique identifier that attackers use to distinguish the victims, or it's called an encryption key. As you can see, it's just got some generic language on it. The mode of communication that is specified in this ransom note is Tor browser, T-O-R, which is the way that you would access the dark web. So they have a platform that is set up on the dark web that attackers use to communicate with their victims. Oftentimes, when threat actors set up a dark web page, there is a timer that gets triggered when you access the page. So it'll tell you that you only have X number of hours to pay, or days to pay a ransom. And then that's like an added time pressure for the victim to front the ransom, of course. If you try and open a file, you'll see that the system doesn't recognize it and it won't know what to do. Again, they're all appended with that ransomware extension. And yeah, so this is what a very typical pedestrian run-of-the-mill ransomware infection would look like. And just imagine this happening at a large scale, at an enterprise-wide scale, can be pretty devastating. Let me just go to the next slide. Excuse me. Okay, so I've been responding to ransomware since around circa 2016 and was lucky enough to have been in incident response since the start of ransomware celebrity status. In those days, ransomware was not really regarded as a serious threat. As far as attack complexities go, they were pretty unsophisticated. Attackers were known to always target the low-hanging fruits. So the idea was that as long as you didn't have a low-hanging fruit, you would be okay. Other types of compromises and breaches like data theft, tax fraud were a lot more common. We often dealt with ransomware attackers that didn't know what they were doing. Ransomware left a lot of irreversible file corruption, which was very annoying. And even amongst the hacker community, ransomware hackers were usually looked down upon as the runt of the litter, as those that are not very technically savvy. Back then, the average ransom demands were typically a handful of Bitcoins, equating to a couple $1,000. I first started responding to ransomware, as I said, in early 2016. And at that time, ransomware was so nascent. The very first ransom payment that I had made was 1 Bitcoin, and that was about $300. At that time, we had no idea how to actually purchase Bitcoins. So we found a dealer on this random exchange website that only accepted cash. And we had to put the cash in a brown paper bag, met up with a guy on the random street corner in downtown San Francisco. And then he finished counting the bills and transferred the Bitcoins to us on his iPad. So that was super dodgy. But thankfully, since then, purchasing cryptocurrency has become a lot more conventional. So has ransomware. The largest ransom that I had handled by 2017 was $50,000. By 2018, it was $300,000. And now it's not entirely uncommon to see ransomware in the millions. The largest ransom that I've personally dealt with was $10 million, but I have seen ransoms that goes over 40 millions. So it's very extravagant. From 2020 to 2021, we saw a marked 47% increase in the severity of ransomware. And tying this into the broader statistic from 2019 to 2020, we saw a 153% increase in the severity of ransomware attacks. And we believe this to be an impact of COVID. Attackers are becoming increasingly more aggressive, increasingly more sophisticated. They're putting in a lot of more effort into their attacks, and there is cost associated with that. Nowadays, it's pretty rare for us to see a ransom demand that's in the 5 figures. If we do encounter a ransom that's $50,000, we like high five each other because we've lucked out. Paying the ransom is, at the end of the day, always the last resort. On the right, you can see screenshots from web pages that are set up by ransomware actors. And as you can see, it's like a whole different air of sophistication than what we saw in the past. There's a background page, there's an instruction page, and there's even a window with an avatar for you to chat with. The caliber of ransomware actors that we deal with today are highly professional with round-the-clock operations and advanced interfaces. They're very stealthy. Their attack vectors are very difficult to detect, and they hide behind many layers of obfuscation. Attackers are also highly interconnected, so it's like this very fine assembly line ecosystem that they have going on with different types of threat groups interacting and collaborating with each other. Ransomware today is also highly destructive, not only on the technical front, but also to business operations and reputationally. And as we touched on prior, ransoms are now exorbitant to say the least, but also in the equation are costs that's associated with business interruption and recovery costs. In addition to the encryption that ransomware imposes on data, there's the subsequent component of attackers stealing sensitive data from within the network and then threatening to publish or release or sell that data should a ransom not be paid. Data exfiltration and the additional component of extortion is a very big problem. About 5 years ago, a ransomware incident rarely equated with an actual data breach because it was solely an encryption event and not a data theft event. But since late 2019, the game changed, and now there's the game changed because of the prominent adoption of backups and data contingency. So because industries or companies are now able to recover business operations through backups, attackers had to be more creative in coming up with ways to further extort their victims. And so the way they do that is to hold data ransom. And should you not pay that, then they would leak it onto the dark web or publicly release that to customers and the media. And essentially this is what it looks like. And as you can see, it's very sophisticated. It's very easy to download that data. And that's just additional leverage for them. Okay, so ransomware operations are so well run today that they even have representatives who call you on the phone. And this is a recording from one of CIR's cases, which I'll play shortly. And feel free to follow along, follow along in the transcript.
So I will not call you actually anymore. This is the first and last time.
Okay. I don't understand. I don't understand how I go onto a chat.
I can guide you now. You need a pen and a paper to write down how to do that. When you will double click this file, it will open in that Tor browser as a chat window. And that is the chat where you will communicate with my mates. You can type anything there like hello or something, anything you want, and you will get a reply very fast. And since then, negotiations will be started. We're not going to take a huge amount from you. We're not going to publish your data until we have successful negotiations. We will provide you samples what we have. We will provide you a sample of the decryptor so you can be sure that it works. We are not from your competitors or from authorities, no. And we will not tell anybody in the world about this leak. So it will be confidential between you and us. Negotiate with us and you will get your business back fast.
You can't tell me that anyone in the world wants to receive a phone call like that. Responding to ransomware incidents, negotiations, and communications are very delicate, and they do require expertise to handle as effectively, as cheaply, and as timely as possible. Especially in the face of a lot of misconceptions, I really do hope to highlight the importance of engaging legal and technical expertise during an active breach. Many business leaders are under the impression that they don't have cyber exposure, that hackers will never target them because they're such a small shop. I've heard business owners tell me that they never expected themselves to be the victim of a hack because they're just a mom and pop shop. They're not Coca-Cola. The thing is, most attackers are opportunistic and industry agnostic. They don't care about how many employees that you have. They don't care about what your business function is. All they care about is the accessibility of your data and your network and what they can do to extort money from you. They're not after like some secret Coca-Cola recipe. They're after money, and small businesses are a gold mine to hackers because small businesses usually don't have robust network perimeters, strong IT support, and backups in place. Speaking of backups, Many people also hold the belief that as long as you have an antivirus in place with backups, then you're adequately protected from a major loss. And unfortunately, that is also very far from the truth. The majority of attacks and attack trajectories that we deal with today can easily evade antivirus detections. Attackers are very stealthy, sophisticated, and I've seen them dance around security products quite easily. While having the ability to recover your data is key, backups don't protect your organization from data theft and publication of sensitive information. And even in the presence of backups during an incident, it can come to light that backups integrity was not up to speed, that backups have been failing for months, or that the technical team has no experience restoring from backups. And that ties into the third misconception, that your IT provider or your MSP would have all of the resources to support you during a security event. IT personnel are absolutely critical during incident response because they know the digital landscape more intimately than anyone. So their assistance is paramount. But there are so many factors that need to be taken into account when dealing with a security event that stretches far beyond general capabilities of IT, starting with containment, removing malicious persistence that could have been in the environment for months, doing a forensic investigation to determine the extent of that damage. Businesses could face regulatory fines, legal fees, and data recovery costs. Also long-term impacts, which include lower brand reputation, customer loyalty, and customer satisfaction. So it's a whole slew of things, and it's critical to engage the assistance of those with expertise in the areas to mitigate the damage as quickly as possible. So I hope I was able to do justice in painting accurately and transparently the intensity of the risks that we're encountering today and in the threat landscape. I cannot emphasize enough the criticality for organizations, regardless of their size and industry, to be equipped with cyber insurance. As the landscape evolves, attackers are adapting along with it, and the industry is constantly playing catch up. Cyber insurance also needs to adapt and evolve and stay present and relevant. So with that being said, I'm excited to turn this over to Katie, who will be speaking more to the importance of the role that insurance plays.
Thanks, Shelley. That was wonderful. I hope you guys took a lot out of that today with everything that she's told you. So historically, cyber was written on a reactive rather than a proactive basis, meaning you buy a policy and nothing really happens until you suffer a loss, and then you try and put the pieces back together. But that has changed in the last few years. As you've seen with a lot of Shelley's claims examples, cyber criminals are more sophisticated, which leads me to the first point, that not all cyber insurance is created equal. So what you want to really see is someone not only making you whole again after the loss, but someone that's actively trying to help you prevent or at least reduce the chance of a loss in the first place. So whether that's by scanning the insured's network throughout the policy term, or like looking for new vulnerabilities, or providing any other risk management tools. That could be employee awareness training licenses or partnerships that provide endpoint detection for the insured. You also want an insurance company with the technical knowledge if you do suffer a loss. So an in-house claims team, an incident response team would be a start. They can actually hit the ground running the minute that you report the claim to them. And then lastly, you'd want a carrier that can offer some of the unique emerging coverages, such as bodily injury and property damage. So if someone hacks into your network, if you're a small clinic, for example, someone hacks into your network, causes bodily injury and property damage to either yourself or your patient, you want someone that would pick up that bodily injury, property damage exposure. Another one would be pollution coverage. And not a lot of carriers are actively offering this coverage. In fact, a lot of them are actually excluding it. But you would want someone to cover this if someone hacks into your network and alters something within your manufacturing line, and you spill into a nearby river and a third-party claim ensues because of that. You want someone that will pick that up. And so the next slide is, why would you choose Coalition as your partner? So we do that active protection. We're constantly scanning the network, looking for any threats and trying to proactively help you mitigate that risk before a cyber criminal exploits that. And then another point is immediate response. We have a team that's available 24/7, 365, and they can hit the ground running immediately after you report a claim to us. And then that broad coverage, because of our scanning capabilities, we're seeing less claims than the industry, and we are able to offer all of that broad coverage. For example, the pollution coverage. We can actually see if you remote into your network, and we can actually underwrite to the exposure for that. Shelley, if you want to go to the next slide, yeah. So here are some of the coverages that you would want to look at. So breach response costs. So if you do suffer a loss, you want to look for a policy that would cover any of the forensics. So figuring out what happened, credit monitoring for your clients, notification costs. So if your client data is leaked, it is your responsibility to notify them that that has happened, and that can become really costly, especially if you store a lot of records. So what we would cover would be the notification costs and credit monitoring for your clients. Shelley briefly touched on, or actually didn't briefly touch on, but she touched on cyber extortion. You want a policy that would cover the extortion loss. So not only figuring out how the bad actor got into your system in the first place, but in the end, if you can't claw back, you want someone that would actually cover to get you back into your systems again after a loss. And then the crime coverages, so funds transfer. If you transfer funds to a bad actor, you want a policy to respond. So if they can't claw back those funds, like Shelley mentioned, you want someone that will actually pay those out for you. And then the business interruption piece is also critical. If your systems are down and you can't operate, you're losing money, you're losing revenue because of that. We would actually cover that under a policy for you as well. Next slide, please. So with our team at Coalition, we have an in-house claims and incident response team, Shelley being part of the incident response team. They're available 24/7, 365. We have a lot of veterans on our team, including privacy lawyers. Our head of claims, Catherine Loyal, was the head of claims for Swiss Re, all of North America for tech and cyber. So again, a lot of great expertise on our team. We want you to report those claims to us. We want to be that first call. Because of our underwriting process, we can see how the bad actors potentially got into your system again. We have relationships with all the major banks and local authority, and we're quick to respond within minutes. If you don't respond to a cyber claim within minutes, it can be devastating, and we can help you with that. It does say an average of 5 minutes, but I've actually seen a claim come in and our team was on the phone with the insured, walking them through within a minute of them reporting it. Next slide. And I'm going to pass it back over to Shelley, and she's going to go through some of the recommendations for you.
Sure, thanks, Katie. I think let me just pop back onto the previous slide and add a few more points. So our approach is to be as proactive as possible, and we have several different types of offerings. The one that most folks are familiar with is incident response, which is after a breach or compromise has occurred. We also offer what's called security office hours, where the insurers or applicants can schedule a time to chat with the security personnel on cyber-related topics. So if you are experiencing something minor and would like some quick advice or guidance, we can set up a security office call and then assess the situation and offer next steps. And one of our most game-changing offerings is the malware signal alerts, which has enabled us to prevent huge losses. So what that is part of our efforts is monitoring known attacker infrastructure and domains. So infrastructure that threat intelligence has determined the likelihood that they belong to an attacker. So we would monitor the traffic going to or coming from our insurance networks, and if there's any communication with these attacker domains. And sometimes we receive external indications that we call signals that may allude to an active malware infection from within our policyholders' networks. Should we positively identify one of these malicious signals, we would then jump into action right away and then work on containment and next steps and whether investigation is necessary. And we've witnessed attackers on the dark web communicating about about flipping the switch on our insurance network just hours after we were able to remediate. So these types of active, proactive response techniques and security monitoring is very critical to preventing a claim. Okay, so now that we've spent the better chunk of this presentation talking about everything that could go wrong, I'd like to use the next slide to just discuss some easy things that you could do that could go a long way in ensuring that you're a better cyber risk. We've already touched on the fact that almost half of security incidents come through emails. And so securing email is absolutely key. Turn on multi-factor authentication for all of your business critical services, but in particular email. Securing remote access, making sure that you're not just using remote desktop protocol that's exposed to the internet. It is the most common method of entry for low-level ransomware attackers. So having RDP enabled on the public is pretty much the same as having your door wide open with a sign outside that says everyone is welcome. If your organization absolutely does require remote access, consider securing it behind a VPN. Implement security awareness training. As I said, the weakest link in the chain is what's sitting behind the keyboard. Human error accounts for 60% of coalition's claims. Clicking on a bad link, opening a bad attachment, visiting a website that you shouldn't be visiting, falling for social engineering scams, the list goes on. So ensuring employees are vigilant and trained up on how to recognize fishy activities and how to protect themselves, as well as what to do in a cyber event, can go a long way. Establish backup routines. The only saving grace to a fully fledged ransomware catastrophe is backups. So ensuring that they're not only present, but that they're also backed up at appropriate intervals, preferably nightly. Ensure that backups are completely off-site, that they're completely disconnected from the primary network, because obviously should the ransomware impact the network and the backups are connected, then the backups would also be hit with encryption. And finally, ensure that backups are valid and that the team knows how to restore from backups in a timely manner so as to minimize as much business interruption as possible. And the last element I want to touch on is to ensure proper data hygiene. And this basically means knowing where your data resides, especially mission critical data. Often when I do respond to an active ransomware case or some type of data breach, it can be it's a very stressful situation. And that stress is compounded when the team has no idea where the important data resides. So what do we need to decrypt first, or what do we need to recover first so that some operations can resume? What devices do we need to examine if data theft or exfiltration occurred? Where are the personally identifiable information or health records stored? A solid inventory is needed to ensure a smooth and timely response effort. And it goes without saying that to augment the technical implementations, it is critical for organizations to be protected with insurance, with some type of cyber insurance. And so I'm going to pass this back to Katie to talk about Coalition's approach with regards to that.
Thanks, Shelley. So right now the market is distressed. The industry loss ratio for cyber claims is close to 500%. So meaning every dollar that an insurance carrier brings in, they're paying out 5 times that. And what you see in the market right now is insurance carriers lowering limits, getting off risk in certain classes, adding what we call co-insurance clauses where you as the insured would be responsible for paying half the loss. That's not the stance that we're taking at Coalition, and it really has a lot to do with our capabilities. Next slide. So we've definitely had to take a dramatic shift in the marketplace in order to keep up with those bad actors. And from a Coalition perspective, at least with being an insurtech, we're able to take a very nuanced approach in that we can actually scan the internet-facing assets of any potential client and identify any entry points. So that could include outdated software, open ports. And what we're really trying to do is locate those and assist you with closing them down before a cyber criminal finds them. Cyber criminals have the same type of scanning capabilities that we do, except they're using it to target people rather than assist in helping them like we are. So they're actually trying to exploit those vulnerabilities. So we take the technology, we enumerate off that, meaning we find out all of your associated technology that you own, and we do a perimeter scan of that, looking for vulnerabilities. So it's completely non-invasive. It's like walking up to the door, knocking on the door, seeing if the door opens, but not actually entering, which we think is a very unique approach, and it seems to be working for us right now. So with our results, we're seeing far less claims in the industry, right? And it has a lot to do with our scanning capabilities. And also we have what's called a feedback loop. So we're taking the information post-breach and we're feeding that back into our underwriting process. So we're always becoming aware of new vulnerabilities in certain software, and we're taking that, we're scanning our policyholders. So we scan our policyholders network once a month right now, and we're looking for those vulnerabilities, and we're actively trying to help them close those off. So as you can see from this slide, we're actually seeing about 70% less claims in the industry. So this stat is taken from coalition data and also the NAIC, which is the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and they provide expertise data and analysis for insurance commissioners to effectively regulate the insurance industry and protect their consumers. So as you can see here, there's a big difference in what we're seeing. Shelley, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I did not. I think you covered it.
Perfect. Well, that concludes our presentation. Did anyone have any questions for us? I didn't see anything come in during the presentation. No questions. Well, again, thank you for joining us today. I really hope that you did learn something and that you will take this away with you when you're trying to grow your business. We can send you a copy of the recommended controls to put in place after this presentation.
Perfect. Thank you, Katie and Shelley, for taking the time to share your extensive cyber knowledge with all of us. Cowan works very closely with Coalition, so we encourage anyone to connect with us to learn more and how we can help secure your business against these cyber attacks. Also, just a reminder, the link in the chat box to enter to win part of our 10K contest. And again, thank you for the Chamber for organizing another successful business growth series, and to everyone attending, thank you. We hope you've learned, found the content and recommendations today valuable with helping to better secure your business.